Welcome to this explainer. Have you ever stopped to wonder who's actually in charge when the global economy starts going off the rails? Well, today we're going to demystify the massive scale, the kind of hidden internal mechanics, and the absolutely fascinating geopolitical drama of the G20. Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. 1. Meet the group of 20. 2. Inside the G20 machine. 3. India at the helm. 4. Enter the D10 coalition. And finally, 5. Cracks in global consensus. Let's dive right in. Section 1, Meet the Group of 20, understanding the scale of the world's premier forum. Now, to really wrap our heads around international relations, we first have to grasp the sheer economic weight of this group. I mean, these 19 countries plus the European Union, they function as a literal board of directors for Earth. Representing a massive 85% of global GDP, when these nations sit down at a table, they're essentially managing the world's bank account. We're talking about the vast majority of the wealth, the production, and the industrial capacity of the entire planet, all consolidated into a single room. And when you add in the fact that they also control 3/4 of all global trade and represent 2/3 of the world's entire population, well, their influence just becomes undeniable. They literally dictate the flow of goods, services, and capital. So decisions made in this forum ripple directly into our daily lives, affecting everything from international inflation rates down to the cost of our groceries and even the security of our jobs. But here's the thing, the G20 wasn't always this powerhouse. It was founded back in 1999, really just as a reactionary meeting for finance ministers who were trying to stop the bleeding after the Asian financial crisis. But then, the massive 2008 global financial crisis hit, and the world suddenly needed much faster, much higher level coordination. So the group was elevated to the heads of state level, bringing presidents and prime ministers into the fold. And by 2009, it was officially designated the world's premier economic forum. That's a rapid evolution in just 1 decade, right? Transforming from a localized response team into the supreme governing body of global economics. Section 2. Inside the G20 machine. How the global boardroom actually operates. So, despite wielding all this immense power, the way the G20 actually governs itself is, well, it's highly unusual. There's no central headquarters, no permanent staff. There's no UN-style building sitting in New York or Geneva. Instead, leadership rotates annually among 5 regional groups. Think about that for a second. The entity managing 85% of the global economy operates like an incredibly high-stakes relay race. Every single year, a new country takes the baton, hosts the summit, and temporarily sets the entire global agenda. To keep things running smoothly without permanent staff, they rely on a system called the Troika. This is basically an alliance of the previous, current, and incoming presidencies. For instance, during India's presidency, the Troika was made up of Indonesia, India, and Brazil. This ensures a seamless baton pass, and crucially, it prevents any single host nation from completely derailing long-term global goals. It's a really clever built-in system of checks, balances, and continuity. All year long, the substantive work of the summit is driven by 2 distinct engines. First, you have the Sherpa track, which is led by personal representatives of the national leaders. They're the ones focusing on critical socioeconomic issues, things like global agriculture, health crises, and climate change agreements. Running parallel to that is the finance track, steered by finance ministers and central bank governors. These are the folks tackling the hard numbers, coordinating fiscal policy, standardizing taxation, and managing global financial regulation. Section 3, India at the helm, steering the G20 agenda. When a nation assumes the presidency, they get this incredible opportunity to really shape the massive machine's focus. And we saw this clearly with India's historic leadership, which was anchored by the Sanskrit phrase Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, meaning one earth, one family, one future. Drawn from ancient texts, this wasn't just some catchy slogan. It was a deeply philosophical framing for exactly how the world's largest economies should view their responsibilities to one another, and frankly, to the planet as a whole. India used its time at the helm to proactively expand the conversation outward, pulling in non-government stakeholders and science experts. They didn't just stick to traditional finance. They launched the Research and Innovation Initiative gathering. They pushed hard to advance women's economic leadership through the G20 Empower Group, finding tangible ways to elevate female representation in the private sector. They even looked up at the stars, literally, organizing the Space Economy Leaders Meeting through ISRO to broaden the G20's horizons into the commercial space race. However, as we zoom back out from the operational mechanics to the broader world of global geopolitics, we have to ask a pretty tough question here. Is the G20 losing its grip? I mean, why are alternative global governance groups starting to form if the G20 is supposedly so powerful?
Section 4. Enter the D10 coalition, a strategic pivot by Western democracies.
This brings us to a proposed new arrangements that has drawn major international attention lately. The D10 consists of the G7 nations plus 3 key invitees: India, Australia, and South Korea. Now, originally, the UK proposed this to address 5G supply chain vulnerabilities exposed during the pandemic, basically realizing that critical tech infrastructure was overly reliant on geopolitical rivals. But the United States now views this coalition as a powerful democratic alignment aimed at countering authoritarian states like China. It is a massive strategic shift in how democratic nations are organizing themselves to protect their technological and economic futures. For a nation like India, joining this exclusive coalition offers incredible strategic and economic leverage. It opens doors for cutting-edge technology and vital foreign investments. Politically, it provides a powerful platform to push for long-desired UN Security Council reforms. It also acts as a strategic bulwark in the Indian Ocean and could potentially even evolve into a massive, highly lucrative trade bloc in its own right down the line. Section 5. Cracks in global consensus. The stalling of the G20 machine. The aggressive push for exclusive groups like the D10 really highlights the deep structural fractures currently paralyzing the broader G20. We're looking at a clear chain of recent gridlocks here. They completely missed their collective growth targets back in 2014. They've hit an absolute wall on capping temperature rises at 1.5 degrees and phasing out coal. Major players like the US are actively blocking World Trade Organization appointments, effectively kneecapping international trade dispute resolution. And of course, there is a sharp rise in great power rivalry following the Ukraine crisis. Basically, the global boardroom is genuinely stalling out. Yet critics of these new exclusive alliances point out a very messy reality. You can't just draw a neat line in the sand. Global economies are deeply intertwined. South Korea and the European Union are still heavily invested in trade with China. India simply cannot afford to alienate friendly, non-democratic powers like Vietnam, Iran, or Russia, who are absolutely vital to its own energy and security needs. And honestly, even Western powers themselves continue to cultivate undemocratic allies when it suits their strategic interests. Geopolitics is rarely black and white. And this leaves us with a really vital question to ponder about the survival of the global boardroom. Can rigid geopolitical divisions survive in a world where economies are deeply intertwined with the very rivals they aim to counter? As the G20 navigates these immense pressures, the answer to that question will likely define the economic reality for all of us in the decades to come. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.